Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Kevin Walsh, and I should have forgotten about the Chloe Parker case, but something brought me back to that cursed forest. It was November 15th, 2018, and I'd been a ranger at Mount Hood National Forest for exactly 8 months. 8 months of trying to prove I belonged. 8 months of senior rangers treating me like the college boy who'd rather be reading field guides than tracking actual trails. But Chloe Parker's case, that was different. That was the one that wouldn't let me sleep. She'd vanished 3 months ago on August 22nd during a solo photography expedition near the Timberline Trail. 22 years old, art student from Portland State, blonde hair always in a messy bun, carrying a vintage Canon AE1 that weighed more than her day pack. The official search lasted 2 weeks before they called it off. Hypothermia, they said. Wild animal attack, they said. Lost in the wilderness like dozens of others every year. But I kept her missing person flyer pinned to my cubicle wall at the ranger station. Her smile haunted my morning coffee. Her mother's desperate phone calls echoed in my truck during long patrols. Mrs. Parker called me every Thursday at 2:47 p.m. for weeks, her voice growing thinner each time. "Any news, Ranger Walsh? Anything at all?" The call that brought me back came on a Tuesday. Different voice this time. Detective Sarah Martinez from Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Her words clipping through my iPhone 8 speaker like ice shards. "Walsh, we found something. Chloe Parker's camera. Hiker discovered it yesterday, wedged in a tree root near Zigzag Canyon 2 miles from her last known location." My hands started shaking before she finished the sentence. The camera had been there the whole time, weathered but intact. When they developed the film, they found 26 photos of normal hiking shots, and then photo 27. Photo 27 showed a group of people in dark robes, standing in a perfect circle around what looked like an altar made of stacked stones. The image was grainy, shot from a distance through heavy forest, but clear enough to count 7 figures. Clear enough to see the symbol carved into the largest stone, an inverted pentagram wrapped in thorny vines. "The brass thinks it's a Halloween prank," Martinez said, static crackling through my phone. "But you know that forest better than anyone? What do you think?" What I thought was that Chloe Parker had stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. What I thought was that somewhere in those 40,000 acres of wilderness, something was still waiting. I grabbed my gear from the ranger station that afternoon. Garmin GPS, Motorola radio, first aid kit, energy bars that tasted like chalk, and enough water for a 12-hour search. My supervisor, Janet Reeves, watched me load my Ford F-150 with the expression of someone who'd seen too many rookie rangers chase ghosts into the woods. "Walsh, you're off duty in 3 hours, she said, exhaling Newport smoke into the crisp November air. "Whatever you're planning, don't." But I was already backing out of the parking lot, Chloe's file folder spread across my passenger seat, photo 27 staring up at me like an accusation. The drive to Zigzag Canyon took 47 minutes on Forest Road 18, my truck's heater blasting dry air that made my eyes water. I'd made this drive dozens of times during the initial search, but today felt different. Today, the Douglas firs seemed to lean inward over the asphalt, their shadows reaching like fingers toward my windshield. I parked at the Timberline Trail access point at 4:23 p.m., daylight already fading to that gray November twilight that makes everything look like a black and white photograph. The temperature gauge on my dash read 34 degrees, cold enough that my breath fogged the moment I stepped outside. The forest smelled wrong. Not the usual pine needle and wet earth scent I'd grown to love, but something underneath. Sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase. I chalked it up to seasonal changes, maybe decomposing vegetation, but the smell followed me as I hiked deeper into the woods. My GPS showed Chloe's camera location at coordinates 45.3311 degree N, 121.711 degree W, exactly 1.7 miles northeast of my position. I followed the main trail for the first mile, my Merrill hiking boots crunching through frost-brittle leaves, before cutting off into unmarked forest toward the coordinates. That's when I started finding the markers. Small piles of stones no bigger than my fist, arranged in perfect triangular patterns and placed exactly 50 yards apart. They weren't natural formations. The stones were too uniform, too deliberately placed. Each pile contained exactly 7 stones, and each one sat beside a Douglas fir, marked with a thin vertical cut in the bark. I documented each marker with my phone, snapping photos and recording GPS coordinates. Marker 1 at 45.3298 degree N, 121.7102 W. Marker 250 yards northeast. Marker 3 another 50 yards, following a precise line toward Chloe's camera location. By the time I reached marker 7, my heart was hammering against my ribs. The markers formed a perfect line leading directly to where Chloe had taken her final photograph. Someone had been planning this trail for weeks, maybe months. Someone had been preparing. The tree where hikers found Chloe's camera stood in a small clearing surrounded by massive old-growth firs. The trunk was easily 8 feet in diameter, its bark scarred by decades of weather and wildlife. But at eye level, carved deep into the wood, was the same symbol from photo 27, an inverted pentagram wrapped in thorny vines. I ran my fingers over the carving, feeling the grooves cut deep enough to reveal white wood underneath. The symbol was old, carved months or even years ago, but someone had been maintaining it. The cuts were clean, recently traced with a sharp blade to keep them visible. My radio crackled. Unit 23, this is dispatch. What's your 20? I keyed the mic clip to my jacket. Dispatch Unit 23. I'm at Zigzag Canyon conducting follow-up investigation on the Parker case. GPS coordinates 45.3311, 121.7113. Long pause. Static. Then Janet's voice. Copy 23. Be advised. Weather Service is forecasting temperature drop to 26 degrees tonight. Recommend return to station before dark. I checked my watch. 5:45 p.m. Sunset was at 5:52. In the distance, I could hear something that made my blood freeze. Voices. Human voices speaking in unison, too far away to make out words but close enough to recognize the rhythm. Chanting. I followed the sound deeper into the forest, my flashlight beam cutting through darkness that seemed thicker than normal November night. The chanting grew louder as I moved northeast, following what looked like a game trail marked with more stone piles. After 20 minutes of hiking, I crested a small ridge and saw light flickering through the trees below. Orange light, like firelight, dancing against the darkness. I switched off my flashlight and approached on hands and knees, using fallen logs for cover. What I saw in that clearing will haunt me until the day I die. 7 figures in dark hooded robes stood around a stone altar exactly like the one in Chloe's photograph. Candles placed in specific patterns cast dancing shadows across their faces, but I couldn't make out features. They were chanting in a language I didn't recognize, words that seemed to twist the air around them. And on the altar, arranged like an offering, were personal items I recognized from missing person reports. A hiking boot that matched the description of gear worn by Marcus Chen disappeared October 2017. A University of Oregon sweatshirt belonging to Jennifer Mills vanished December 2016. A red backpack that made my stomach lurch, the same brand and color that Chloe Parker's mother described in her initial police report. But what made me nearly vomit into the forest floor was the wall behind the altar. Carved directly into the rock face, 20 feet tall and covered in symbols, was what looked like a calendar. Rows of marks organized by month and year, with specific dates circled in what looked like dried blood. August 22, 2018, Chloe Parker's disappearance date, was marked with a fresh red circle. November 15, 2018, today, was marked with 2 red circles. I fumbled for my phone to document what I was seeing, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the device. That's when one of the robed figures turned and looked directly at me. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Kevin Walsh's situation? Comment below. The figure's face was wrong. Not deformed, not monstrous, but wrong in a way that made my brain reject what my eyes were seeing. Features that shifted in the candlelight, shadows that moved independently of the fire, eyes that reflected light like an animal's, but held intelligence that felt ancient and hungry. The chanting stopped. All 7 figures turned toward my hiding spot with perfect synchronization, and I realized they'd known I was there the entire time. This wasn't a ritual I'd stumbled upon. This was a trap, and I was the prey. I ran. Crashing through underbrush, branches tearing at my jacket, my flashlight beam swinging wildly as I tried to find the trail back to my truck. Behind me, I could hear them following, not running, but moving with purpose through the forest they knew better than I ever would. My radio crackled with Janet's voice. "Unit 23, respond. Your GPS signal cut out 15 minutes ago." I tried to key the mic, but my hands were shaking too badly. Trees that had looked familiar on my way in now seemed alien, threatening. The stone markers I'd followed were gone. Or maybe I was lost, running in circles while those things herded me deeper into their territory. That's when I understood what had really happened to Chloe Parker. She hadn't gotten lost. She hadn't fallen victim to the elements or wildlife. She'd discovered something that people like her, people like me, weren't supposed to see. The cult that local legend claimed died out in the 1980s hadn't died at all. They'd just gotten better at hiding. They'd been selecting victims for decades. Solo hikers, photographers, people who wouldn't immediately be missed. People whose disappearances could be explained by natural causes. The missing person reports I'd studied weren't random tragedies. They were a pattern, a feeding schedule. And now I was next. I finally found the main trail 47 minutes after starting my panicked flight through the woods. My truck sat exactly where I'd left it, but something was wrong. The driver's side door stood open and my keys were sitting on the hood in a neat pile. They'd been to my truck. They'd gone through my things. And they'd left my keys where I'd find them because they wanted me to know they could have trapped me there if they'd chosen to. I drove back to the ranger station with my doors locked and my radio volume turned all the way up, reporting my location to dispatch every 10 minutes. But in my rearview mirror, I kept seeing shapes moving between the trees, keeping pace with my truck along the forest road. When I finally reached the station, I spent 3 hours writing the most detailed incident report of my career. I documented the stone markers, the coordinates, the carved symbols, the ritual I'd witnessed. I attached photos from my phone and sketched diagrams of the altar and calendar wall. Janet read my report twice, her expression growing more skeptical with each page. "Walsh, this is a lot of detail for something you observed in low-light conditions while under stress," she said finally. "You sure you didn't let the Parker case get into your head? Sometimes the woods play tricks when you're looking for something that isn't there." But I knew what I'd seen. And when Detective Martinez called the next morning to tell me that Chloe Parker's remains had been discovered in a cave system 12 miles from where her camera was found, discovered by anonymous tip, phoned in exactly 12 hours after my encounter with the cult, I knew they were still playing their game. The official cause of death was listed as exposure and traumatic injuries consistent with animal attack. The case was closed. Chloe's family got their answers, and the forest went back to being a place where people occasionally got lost and never came home. But I know the truth. The cult is still there, still selecting victims, still maintaining their calendar of disappearances. They let me go that night as a warning, or maybe because they knew no one would believe a rookie ranger's story about robed figures and ritual altars. I transferred to Crater Lake National Park 3 weeks later, told Janet and everyone else that I needed a fresh start, that the Parker case had affected me too much to stay objective. They were relieved to see me go, but late at night when I'm patrolling the rim road around Crater Lake, I still think about that calendar carved into the rock wall. I still wonder how many other names were marked in dried blood, how many families are still waiting for answers that will never come. And sometimes, when the wind shifts through the Douglas firs just right, I swear I can still hear that chanting. The cult is patient. They've been doing this for decades, maybe longer. They know how to wait, how to select victims, how to make disappearances look like accidents. But they made one mistake that night in November 2018. They let a witness escape. And even if no one believes me now, I'm watching. I'm documenting. I'm learning their patterns. Because somewhere in Mount Hood National Forest, another calendar is being carved, another date is being marked, and next time, I'll be ready for them. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. and comment your theory about what really happened to Chloe Parker. I read every single one. My name is Derek Sullivan, and this was the 6th hour searching for Megan Foster in the trails of Olympic National Park. The October wind cut through my Carhartt jacket like it had personal business with my bones, carrying the metallic scent of coming snow and something else. Something wrong that made my nostrils flare involuntarily. I keyed my radio, static crackling through the forest silence. Base, this is Unit 23. Still no sign of the missing hiker at grid coordinates 47.80 on 29 123, 6044 W, moving to Sector 7. Copy that, Sullivan. Weather's turning nasty up there. You've got maybe 2 hours of decent light left. Dispatch's voice sounded tinny and distant, like it was coming from another world entirely. 2 hours. Megan Foster had been missing for 18 hours now. Last seen on the Sol Duke Trail wearing a bright red North Face jacket that should have been visible from Mars. Her mother's voice kept playing in my head from this morning's briefing. That raw, desperate sound that only comes from a parent whose child has vanished into the wilderness. 23 years old, recent college graduate, experienced hiker. The kind who didn't just disappear. But they all disappear eventually, don't they? The forest has a way of swallowing people whole. My boots crunched through a carpet of wet maple leaves, each step releasing that rich autumn smell of decay and rebirth. After 22 years as a ranger in Olympic, I knew these trails like the lines on my wife Sarah's face. Every route, every switchback, every place where the unwary could step wrong and vanish. The Sol Duke Trail was a moderate hike, well-marked, popular with day hikers. It wasn't the kind of trail that ate people, except when it was. I paused at a junction, consulting my GPS. The Garmin's screen flickered, probably the cold affecting the battery. Technology always failed when you needed it most out here. That's why guys like me still carried paper maps and compass, though the younger rangers laughed at us old-timers and our analog backup systems. "Megan!" My voice echoed off the Douglas firs towering around me like cathedral pillars. "Megan Foster, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just the whisper of wind through needles and the distant sound of running water. But there was something else threading through the forest sounds, a wrongness that raised the hair on my arms. In 22 years, I'd developed instincts that had saved my life more times than I could count. Those instincts were screaming now. I checked my watch. 3:47 p.m. Sarah would be picking up Emma from soccer practice about now, probably checking her phone to see if I'd texted. Our daughter was 11, old enough to worry when Daddy's search and rescue calls ran late. I'd promised to make it home for dinner, help Emma with her science project about forest ecosystems. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Any luck? Emma's making your favorite cookies for when you get home. Love you." The simple message hit me harder than it should have. This job had a way of grinding you down, making you forget there was a world outside the forest where people loved you unconditionally, where little girls baked cookies and waited for their dads to come home safe. I was typing back when I heard it, a voice calling through the trees. "Help, please, someone help us." I froze, thumb hovering over the phone screen. The voice was male, carrying the edge of panic that made my ranger instincts kick into overdrive. I shoved the phone in my pocket and moved toward the sound, hand instinctively checking my radio. "Hello?" I called back. "This is Park Ranger Sullivan. Where are you?" "Over here, thank God we found someone." The voice was closer now, coming from a game trail that branched off the main path. "My wife. She's hurt. We need help." I pushed through a curtain of salmonberry bushes, thorns catching at my jacket. 20 yards ahead, a man emerged from behind a massive cedar trunk. Mid-50s, graying beard, wearing expensive hiking gear that looked barely used. Behind him, a woman sat on a fallen log, clutching her ankle. "Oh, thank Jesus," the man said, hurrying toward me. "I'm Tom Henderson. This is my wife, Carol. We've been lost for hours, and Carol twisted her ankle real bad. You're a ranger, right? Can you help us?" Every detail looked right. The genuine relief in his voice, his wife's pained expression, the way she favored her left foot. but something cold slithered down my spine anyway. That same wrongness I'd been feeling all day concentrated now into a sharp point of unease. "Of course," I said, professional instincts overriding my discomfort. "Let me take a look." Carol Henderson smiled through her obvious pain. "Bless you. We were starting to think we'd be spending the night out here. Tom's sense of direction is about as good as a broken compass." She laughed, and it was a warm sound that should have put me at ease. Should have. Instead, something about the way it echoed in the stillness made my skin crawl. I knelt beside her, pulling out my first aid kit. "How did this happen?" "Stepped wrong on some loose rocks about a half-mile back," Tom said. "We were trying to find our way back to the main trail when we heard you calling for someone." "Megan? Is that who you're looking for?" My hand stilled on Carol's boot. "You heard me calling for Megan?" "That's right." "Poor thing. Is she lost too?" Carol's eyes were the color of moss, and they held mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. "Maybe we saw her earlier. Pretty girl, red jacket." My heart jumped. "You saw her? Where?" Tom and Carol exchanged a look that lasted a fraction too long. "Oh, maybe 2-3 hours ago. She seemed disoriented, asking for directions. We tried to help, but she seemed scared of something." "Scared of what?" "Couldn't say. She kept looking over her shoulder like something was following her. We offered to walk with her back to the main trail, but she took off into the woods." Carol winced as I examined her ankle. Definitely swollen, possibly sprained. Poor thing seemed terrified. The wrongness was growing stronger, like a migraine building behind my eyes. Everything they said made sense, but something underneath their words felt poisonous. I kept my voice steady. Professional. "Which direction did she go?" "North toward the old mining road," Tom said immediately. "We would have followed her and made sure she was safe, but Carol's ankle..." "Of course." I wrapped Carol's ankle with an elastic bandage, my mind racing. The old mining road was off limits to hikers. Too dangerous, lots of abandoned shafts and unstable terrain. If Megan had gone that way. "I need to report this immediately." I reached for my radio, but Tom's hand closed over my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong and cold even through my gloves. "Wait," he said. "Before you do that, maybe you could help us get back to our car first. Carol can barely walk, and it's getting dark. We're parked at the trailhead, just a couple miles from here. Once we're safe, you could go after that girl with backup, proper equipment." It made sense. Good Samaritan logic. Help the injured hiker first, then continue the search with better resources. But every instinct I developed in 2 decades of wilderness work was telling me to run. "I really should report this sighting immediately," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Every minute counts in a missing person case." Carol's moss-green eyes never left my face. "Oh, but it's been hours already. What's another 30 minutes? Besides, you look exhausted. When's the last time you ate something?" She was right. I'd been running on adrenaline and coffee since dawn. My hands had developed a slight tremor and my vision was starting to tunnel at the edges. Classic signs of exhaustion and low blood sugar. "We have food back at our place," Tom added. "Hot coffee, sandwiches. You could eat something, warm up, then head back out refreshed. You'll be more effective that way." "Your place?" I asked. "We're not staying at the trailhead," Carol explained. "We rented a cabin about a mile from here, right off the old logging road. Much more comfortable than a hotel, and we love being close to nature." The old logging road. The same direction they claimed Megan had gone. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Derek Sullivan's situation? Comment below. My radio crackled with static, making all 3 of us jump. "Unit 23, this is base. What's your status?" I looked at Tom and Carol Henderson, at the genuine concern in their faces, at Carol's obviously injured ankle. Then I looked at the deepening shadows between the trees, thought about Megan Foster out there somewhere in the growing dark, possibly hurt, possibly worse. "Unit 23 to base," I said into the radio. "I'm with 2 lost hikers who may have seen our missing person, providing assistance, then following up on their information. We'll report back within the hour." Copy that, Sullivan. Be careful out there. The radio fell silent. Tom Henderson smiled and something cold crawled up my spine. Wonderful, he said. Our car's just this way. Carol, lean on me, sweetheart. They led me off the main trail onto a narrow path I'd never noticed before, despite 22 years of hiking these woods. The trees seemed to close in around us, blocking out what little daylight remained. Our footsteps were muffled by a thick carpet of pine needles that felt wrong under my boots. Too soft, too deep, like walking on bones. So you're local? Carol asked as we walked, her voice bright despite her obvious pain. Born and raised? Seattle originally, but I've been working Olympic for over 2 decades. Something made me add, my wife and daughter are expecting me home for dinner. How lovely, Carol said. What's your daughter's name? Emma. She's 11. Such a precious age. They grow up so fast, don't they? One day they're baking cookies and waiting for Daddy to come home, the next they're off in the world making their own way. I stopped walking. I'd never mentioned Emma baking cookies. That detail had been in Sarah's text, which I'd been reading when Tom first called for help. There was no way Carol could have known that. Something wrong? Tom asked, turning back to look at me. My hand drifted toward my radio. Just, how did you know about the cookies? Carol tilted her head like a bird studying a worm. Did I say something about cookies? I don't think I did. You must be more tired than you thought, dear. But I knew what I'd heard. The wrongness was stronger now, making my teeth ache. The forest around us looked different somehow. The trees too tall, the shadows too deep. The path we were following visible even though it should have been pitch black under the canopy. You know what? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think I should radio for a medical evacuation for your ankle. Get you proper treatment. Oh, that's not necessary, Carol said quickly. It's just a sprain. Really, I'm feeling better already. She was. Despite favoring the ankle for the last 20 minutes, she was now putting full weight on it. The swelling I'd seen earlier was gone. I think I should head back, I said. Tom stepped closer. In the strange, too bright darkness, his eyes looked different. Older. Hungrier. But we're almost there, he said. Just around the bend. Hot coffee, warm food. You'll feel so much better after you eat something. The trees around us began to move, swaying without any wind. The wrongness was everywhere now, pressing against my mind like black water. In the distance, I could hear something that might have been singing or screaming. I reached for my radio, but my hands wouldn't obey. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected, like I was moving through thick honey. That's it, Carol crooned, her voice echoing strangely. Just relax, Derek. Everything's going to be fine. She knew my name. I'd never told her my name. Sleep now, Tom whispered, and his voice was the sound of wind through a graveyard. Sleep, and dream of your wife and daughter. Dream of them while you still can. The forest tilted sideways, and I fell into darkness that tasted of copper and ancient hunger. I woke up in hell, not the fire and brimstone kind, the quiet, domestic kind that's somehow infinitely worse. I was lying on a couch in what looked like a normal living room. Hardwood floors, family photos on the mantel, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Through lace curtains, I could see daylight filtering through trees. My head felt like someone had filled it with broken glass. When I tried to sit up, the room spun violently. Easy there, sleepyhead, Carol's voice came from the kitchen. You took quite a tumble on that trail, probably hit your head on a rock. I touched my forehead and felt a tender lump. Had I fallen? Everything after meeting Tom and Carol was a blur of wrong memories and impossible shadows. Where? My voice came out as a croak. You're in our cabin, Tom said, appearing in the doorway with a steaming mug. Found you unconscious on the trail about 50 yards from here. Lucky we were out for our evening walk. The coffee smelled incredible, rich and dark with hints of cinnamon. My stomach growled audibly. When had I last eaten? This morning? Yesterday. Drink this, Tom said, pressing the mug into my hands. Carol's making breakfast. Eggs, bacon, the works. You need food in your system. I started to lift the mug to my lips, then stopped. The coffee's surface was perfectly still, no steam rising despite the heat I could feel through the ceramic. In the black liquid, I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood freeze. A flash of red fabric like a jacket sinking into dark water. "Megan," I whispered. "What's that, dear?" Carol called from the kitchen. "Megan Foster, the missing hiker. I was looking for her when..." I trailed off, trying to piece together the fragments in my head. "You said you saw her. On the trail." Tom and Carol exchanged another of those two long looks. "I think you might be confused," Tom said gently. "Concussion can do that. We found you alone on the trail, no missing hiker around." "But you said..." "We didn't say anything about a missing person," Carol interrupted, emerging from the kitchen with a plate of eggs that smelled like heaven. "You must have been dreaming." The wrongness was back, subtle but insistent. I set the coffee down without drinking and reached for my radio. It wasn't there. "Looking for this?" Tom held up my radio, my GPS, my phone. "Had to remove them when we brought you in. They were damaged in your fall. We'll get them fixed for you, don't worry." My service weapon was gone too, along with my first aid kit and emergency supplies. I was alone in a cabin in the woods with two people whose story kept changing, wearing nothing but my uniform and growing paranoia. "I need to get back," I said, standing on unsteady legs. "There's a search and rescue operation." "Sit down before you fall down," Carol said firmly. "You're in no condition to go anywhere. Besides, there's no rush. Your colleagues will handle things." "How do you know about my colleagues?" Another look between them. "You told us, remember? Before you passed out." I didn't remember. I remembered finding them on the trail, Carol's injured ankle, the wrongness growing stronger until... nothing. A blank space where my memories should be. "At least let me call my wife," I said. "She'll be worried." "Of course," Tom said. "After breakfast. The landline works fine." There was a landline phone on the kitchen counter, an old rotary model that looked like it belonged in a museum. But when I picked it up, there was no dial tone. Just silence. And underneath that, something that might have been breathing. "Having trouble?" Carol asked, not looking up from her cooking. "No signal." "Sometimes happens out here. The mountains, you know. Try again in a little bit." I hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the forest looked wrong. The trees were too tall, their branches intertwining in patterns that hurt to look at. The sky was the color of old bone, and I couldn't see the sun anywhere. "What time is it?" I asked. "Does it matter?" Tom said. "Time moves differently in the woods. Surely you know that after 22 years as a ranger." I'd never told them how long I'd been a ranger. The eggs were perfect, fluffy and golden with just the right amount of salt. The bacon was crisp, but not burnt. The coffee rich and warming. It was the best breakfast I'd ever tasted, and every bite made me feel stronger, clearer, more at home in this cozy cabin where nothing was right. "Better?" Carol asked, refilling my coffee. "Much. Thank you." The words came out automatically, but inside, panic was building like pressure behind a dam. "I really do need to get back, though. There are people counting on me." "People are always counting on something," Tom said philosophically. "But what if those people don't really need you as much as you think they do?" "What do you mean?" Carol sat down across from me, her moss-green eyes bright with interest. "Tell us about your family, Derek. Your wife Sarah, your daughter Emma." I definitely never told them their names. "How do you..." "You talk in your sleep," Carol said. "Such a devoted husband and father. It's beautiful, really, the way you worry about them, put their needs ahead of your own." "But do they worry about you the same way?" Tom asked. "Really think about it. When's the last time Sarah asked about your day? Really asked, not just polite conversation while she's doing dishes or checking her phone." I opened my mouth to answer and found I couldn't. "When was the last time?" And Emma, Carol continued, 11 years old, right on the cusp of adolescence. Soon she won't want Daddy helping with science projects. She'll want to spend time with friends, boys, anyone except her embarrassing father. It's the natural order, Tom said kindly. Children grow up, wives grow distant. Everyone moves on eventually. But here, with us, you could matter. Really matter. The coffee was making me dizzy, or maybe it was the conversation. The room seemed to be slowly rotating around me. Family photos on the walls, shifting and changing when I wasn't looking directly at them. What are you talking about? We're talking about purpose, Carol said. Meaning, you've spent 22 years rescuing people who forget about you the moment they're safe, helping tourists who see you as part of the scenery, coming home exhausted to a family that takes your sacrifices for granted. That's not true, isn't it? Tom leaned forward. When's the last time anyone truly appreciated what you do? I mean, really appreciated it. Not just a thank you card or a pat on the back from your supervisor. I couldn't answer because they were right, and that realization felt like a knife between my ribs. When was the last time Sarah had seemed genuinely interested in my work? When was the last time Emma had looked at me with real admiration instead of mild tolerance? We appreciate you, Carol said softly. We see how special you are, how much you care, how hard you work to help people who don't deserve your dedication. The family photos on the walls were definitely changing now. I caught glimpses of faces I didn't recognize, scenes that looked familiar but wrong. Christmas mornings with too many presents, birthday parties with too many candles, family dinners where everyone was smiling too widely. We could be your real family, Tom said. The family that truly understands you. I have a family. Do you? Carol touched my hand and her fingers were ice cold. Or do you have people you happen to live with? People who take up space in your house and your heart but don't really see you? The worst part was how reasonable she sounded. How much sense it all made. The loneliness I'd been carrying for years, the growing distance between me and Sarah, Emma's increasing disinterest in spending time with her old man. It was all true. Sarah loves me, I said, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Sarah loves the idea of you, Tom corrected. The steady paycheck, the health insurance, the security you provide. But does she love Derek Sullivan, the man? The person who risks his life for strangers and comes home exhausted every night? I thought about Sarah's reaction when I'd gotten the call this morning. Not worry for my safety, not interest in the case, just a side reminder to be home for dinner. When had she stopped asking about my day? When had our conversations become nothing but logistics and household management? And what about Megan Foster? Carol asked. Sweet, pretty Megan, with her whole life ahead of her. Do you think she'll remember the ranger who saved her? Do you think she'll write you letters, send Christmas cards, invite you to her wedding? That's not why I do this job, isn't it? Tom smiled, and his teeth looked sharper than they should have. You tell yourself it's about duty, about service, but deep down you're looking for recognition, validation. You want to matter to someone. The coffee was getting cold in my hands, but I couldn't seem to put it down. The room was definitely spinning now, slowly and hypnotically. The wrongness I'd felt in the forest was everywhere, seeping through the walls like toxic gas. We want to help you matter, Carol said. We want to show you what it feels like to be truly appreciated. What do you mean? Tom reached under the coffee table and pulled out a photo. It showed a young woman in a red jacket smiling at the camera. Megan Foster. She's safe, he said. Safer than she's ever been, and so grateful for our help. My blood turned to ice water. Where is she? Close, very close. Carol's smile was radiant and terrible. Would you like to see her? I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't support me. The coffee cup fell from my nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The liquid that spilled wasn't coffee. It was dark red and smelled of copper. Don't fight it, Tom said gently. This is what you've been looking for your whole life. People who really need you. People who will never leave you, never grow up and move away, never take you for granted. The family photos on the walls were moving now, the faces in them turning to look at me with hollow, desperate eyes. I recognized some of them, missing hikers from cases going back years. People who had vanished in Olympic National Park and never been found. "Welcome to our family, Derek," Carol whispered, and her voice was the sound of wind through empty houses. "Welcome home." The basement was carved from living rock, the walls weeping moisture that never seemed to reach the floor. Candles provided the only light, dozens of them arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air tasted of old copper and newer fear. Megan Foster hung from chains bolted to the ceiling, her red North Face jacket torn but still recognizable. She was alive. I could see her chest rising and falling, but unconscious. Or maybe just gone somewhere inside her head where the pain couldn't reach. "She's lovely, isn't she?" Carol stroked Megan's hair with maternal tenderness. "So young, so full of life. It's been days since we had someone her age." I tried to speak, but my throat felt like it was full of sand. The drug in the coffee, whatever they'd given me, had left me paralyzed but aware. I could see, hear, feel everything, but my body wouldn't obey my commands. "Don't try to talk yet," Tom advised. "The preparation takes time, but don't worry. You'll have plenty of opportunity to scream later." They'd stripped me to my underwear and bound me to a wooden chair with rope that felt organic against my skin, like it was made from something that had once been alive. Around the basement's perimeter, more chairs held the remains of people who had trusted Tom and Carol Henderson's kind faces and helpful manner. Some of the remains were recent. Others had been there much longer. 26 years we've been doing this," Carol said conversationally, lighting fresh candles from the stubs of old ones. "Tom and I met at a prayer meeting, if you can believe that. Both of us searching for something more meaningful than ordinary life. We found it," Tom added, sharpening a knife that gleamed in the candlelight. "Purpose, direction, the knowledge that we were chosen for something greater." The knife was ornate, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in the flickering light. When Tom tested the edge against his thumb, the drop of blood that welled up was black. "People think Satan is about evil," Carol continued, arranging instruments on a table that made my stomach clench. "But he's really about truth, the truth that most people can't handle, that we're all alone in an indifferent universe, that love is a lie we tell ourselves, that the only meaning we'll ever find is what we create through our own will." Megan Foster stirred in her chains, eyelids fluttering. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with hope that quickly faded to despair as she took in our surroundings. "Derek?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You came looking for me." I tried to tell her everything would be okay, that help was coming, but I could only manage a strangled grunt. "Oh, Derek came looking for you," Tom said cheerfully. "And he found you, didn't he? Isn't that wonderful? Now you'll both be part of our family forever." "The ritual is quite beautiful," Carol explained to Megan. "First the fear, then the pain, then the transcendence. By the end, you'll understand that death isn't an ending, it's a transformation. You'll become part of something larger than yourself." She selected a curved blade from her collection, holding it up to catch the candlelight. "The key is taking your time. Rushed sacrifice is meaningless sacrifice. The entity we serve feeds on suffering, but it prefers the slow kind, the kind that ripens properly." Megan was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked at me with desperate hope, still believing I might somehow save her. But I couldn't even save myself. "Your family will miss you," Tom said to me, beginning to arrange more candles in a circle around my chair. "For a while. Sarah will cry at the funeral. Emma will have nightmares. But grief fades, Derek. People move on. In 5 years, Sarah will have remarried. In 10, Emma won't think about you except on Father's Day, and even then only briefly." The candles he was lighting were different from the others. Black wax that smelled like burning hair. When he lit them, the flames burned with an unnatural blue-green light that cast writhing shadows on the basement walls. "But your suffering will be eternal," Carol added happily. "Every cut, Every scream, every moment of agony will feed our master and ensure that a part of you lives forever in service to something greater than your pathetic human concerns. She approached Megan with the curved knife, and I found my voice at last. Stop. The word came out as a croak, but it was audible. Both Tom and Carol turned to look at me with interest. Ah, the paralytic is wearing off, Tom observed. Right on schedule. We want you conscious for this part, Derek. Aware and able to participate fully in the experience. Please, I managed. Let her go. Take me instead. Carol laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, darling, we're taking both of you. But if it makes you feel better, we'll start with her. That way you can watch what's going to happen to you. She turned back to Megan, who was hyperventilating now, struggling uselessly against her chains. The curved blade reflected the blue-green candlelight as Carol positioned it against Megan's exposed forearm. Our Father who art in hell, Carol began, her voice taking on a ritual cadence. Hallowed be thy name of power. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in flesh as it is in spirit. The blade bit into Megan's skin, drawing a thin line of blood. Megan screamed, a sound that would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my very short life. Something hot and violent exploded in my chest, not the hopeless terror I'd been feeling, but pure, concentrated rage. This girl was 23 years old. She'd graduated college, had dreams, people who loved her. Her mother was probably sitting by the phone right now, praying for news that would never come. And I was the one who was supposed to bring her home safe. The rope around my wrists was tight, but rage made me strong. I felt something give way as I strained against the bonds, heard Tom curse as my chair rocked. Restrain him properly, Carol snapped, not breaking the rhythm of her chanting. Give me that grace to rule through fear, to feast on pain, and to bring all souls to their true master. Tom dropped his candle and rushed toward me, but 22 years of wilderness survival had taught me how to fight when my life depended on it. I drove my head forward into his nose, feeling cartilage crunch. Blood sprayed across my face as he stumbled backward. The chair I was tied to was old wood, probably decades old. When I threw my weight sideways, one of the legs snapped with a sound like a gunshot. I crashed to the stone floor, but the impact loosened the ropes enough for me to work one hand free. Carol spun toward me, the bloody knife raised, her face twisted with fury. You stupid, selfish man. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Saving her, I snarled, rolling away from the knife thrust. You can't save anyone, Carol shrieked. That's the beautiful truth, nobody can be saved. We're all just meat waiting to rot. She lunged again, but I'd gotten my legs free and managed to kick her in the knee. She went down hard, the knife skittering across the stone floor toward the shadows. Tom was back on his feet, blood streaming from his broken nose, holding a ritual dagger that looked even nastier than Carol's blade. But there was something different about his movement. Less coordinated, almost puppet-like. You cannot stop what has already begun, he said. But his voice was layered now, as if multiple people were speaking through his mouth. The ritual is consecrated. The offering has been accepted. The basement around us was changing. The walls were breathing, expanding, and contracting like the inside of some massive lung. The candle flames had turned blood red, and in their light I could see shapes moving in the darkness between the stone blocks. Things with too many teeth and not enough eyes. But none of that mattered. What mattered was getting Megan out of here. I dove for the knife Carol had dropped, my fingers closing around the handle just as Tom's dagger whistled through the air where my head had been. The blade was hot to the touch and seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy, but it was sharp, and that was enough. Tom, or the thing wearing Tom's face, came at me again, moving with inhuman speed, but I'd been in more fights than I cared to remember, and rage had burned away my exhaustion. I feinted left, then drove the ritual knife up between his ribs. The scream that came out of his mouth wasn't human. It was the sound of 10,000 voices crying out in unison, a noise that made the stone walls crack and the candles flicker. Black blood poured from the wound, hissing where it hit the floor. You killed him, Carol whispered from where she knelt, clutching her injured knee. You killed my husband. He was already dead, I said, though I wasn't sure how I knew that. Whatever you two invited in killed him a long time ago. I cut Megan's bonds with the same knife that had tasted Tom's inhuman blood. She collapsed into my arms, semi-conscious but breathing. The ritual had only just begun. She was hurt, but not dying. "Can you walk?" I whispered. She nodded weakly. "I think so." "Then we're getting out of here." Carol laughed from behind us, a sound like hyenas fighting over carrion. "Out? Oh, Derek, you still don't understand. There is no out. This basement exists outside normal space. We built it on a convergence of ley lines, consecrated it with decades of suffering. You can't just walk up the stairs and leave." I looked toward where the basement stairs should have been. There was nothing but smooth stone wall. "The only way out is through transcendence," Carol continued, pulling herself upright despite her injured knee. "Through accepting your place in the natural order. Through understanding that everything you've believed about love and hope and rescue is a lie." The walls were definitely breathing now, and something was moving in the shadows between the stones, something large and patient and hungry. The temperature was dropping, and I could see my breath misting in the red candlelight. "Your wife doesn't really love you," Carol whispered, her voice somehow carrying across the basement despite the impossible acoustics. "Your daughter will forget you. Everyone you've ever saved will go on with their lives without a second thought. But here, with us, you'll matter forever." Megan gripped my arm with surprising strength. "Don't listen to her," she breathed. My mom loves me so much she made me promise to call twice a day. There are people who love us, real love." "Pretty words," Carol sneered. "But where are they now? Where's all that love when you need it most?" As if in answer, my radio crackled to life from somewhere in the darkness. Tom must have dropped it when I headbutted him. Unit 23, this is base. Derek, what's your status? We've got search teams mobilizing. Everyone's looking for you. Sarah's here. She's worried sick. Come back, Derek." My dispatcher's voice was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "Derek?" Sarah's voice came through the static, high and tight with fear. "Baby, if you can hear this, Emma and I love you so much. Please come home to us. Please." Carol's face twisted with rage. "Lies. Pretty lies to make you feel better about dying." Emma's voice small and scared. "Daddy, I made extra cookies. The chocolate chip ones you like. They're waiting for you." I felt something break open in my chest. Not the cold rage I'd felt when Carol cut Megan, but something warm and bright and absolutely certain. These people weren't just voices on a radio. They were home. They were the reason I got up every morning, the reason I risked my life for strangers, the reason 22 years of this job hadn't broken me. "You're wrong," I told Carol, helping Megan to her feet. "About all of it." I found my radio in the shadows near Tom's body. When I keyed it, the red candles flickered as if a wind had blown through the basement. "Base, this is Unit 23. I've found Megan Foster. We're alive, but in immediate danger. GPS coordinates." I looked at my watch, but the face was black. "I don't know our exact location, but we're in some kind of underground structure. There are 2 suspects, 1 down, 1 still active. We need immediate backup." "Derek!" My dispatcher's voice was full of relief. "Copy that. Help is on the way. Can you get to a recognizable landmark?" "Working on it." I looked around the breathing basement with its impossible geometry and blood-stained altar. The shadows between the stones were moving more actively now, and I could hear something like singing or screaming in the distance. "There has to be a way out," I told Megan. "They got us down here somehow." "Through the door that only opens one way," Carol said. She was standing now despite her injured knee, and there was something wrong with her face. It kept shifting, showing glimpses of other people underneath. Decades of victims whose deaths had fed whatever lived in this place. The door that only opens for the chosen. Then we make our own door. I looked at the curved knife in my hand, still slick with Tom's black blood. The blade was obviously ritual-made, consecrated for dark purposes. But consecration worked both ways, didn't it? "Megan, stand back." I approached the wall where the stairs should have been and pressed the blade against the stone. Where the metal touched, the rock began to hiss and smoke. "That won't work," Carol laughed. "You can't cut through blessed stone with—" The knife went through the wall like it was paper, opening a gash that leaked pale light and cold air. Real air, carrying the scent of pine and rain, and the promise of open sky. Carol's laugh died in her throat. "Impossible. You forgot something," I said, widening the cut. "This knife has tasted innocent blood tonight. Megan's blood. And sometimes innocent blood is stronger than any curse." The gash in the wall was big enough to crawl through now, and I could see forest on the other side. Real forest with real trees and real sky. Dawn light was filtering through the canopy. "Come on," I said to Megan. "Time to go home." Carol screamed behind us, a sound that made the basement walls crack further. "You can't leave. The ritual isn't finished. You belong to us now." But we were already through the hole, tumbling out onto wet pine needles and blessed solid earth. The fresh air hit me like a drug, washing away the basement's stench of blood and supernatural wrongness. Behind us, the hole in reality was already sealing itself. Through the shrinking gap, I caught a glimpse of Carol standing amid the ruins of her ritual chamber, her face cycling through dozens of different victims as she screamed her fury at the morning sky. Then the hole closed completely, leaving nothing but a slight depression in the forest floor and the memory of something that should never have existed. Megan and I sat in the pine needles for a long moment, just breathing clean air and feeling grateful to be alive. My radio was working normally now, and within minutes I could hear the sound of helicopters and search dogs approaching through the trees. "Derek?" Megan's voice was hoarse but steady. "Thank you. Just doing my job." "No," she said firmly. "You went beyond your job, way beyond. You saved my life." The rescue teams found us 20 minutes later, and the questions started immediately. How had we gotten so far off the trail? What had happened to my equipment? Why were we both covered in blood that didn't seem to belong to either of us? I told them the truth, as much of it as I thought they'd believe. 2 suspects had kidnapped Megan and held her in an underground bunker. I'd tracked them down and managed to free her. In the struggle, 1 suspect was killed and the other escaped. The bunker had collapsed, burying the evidence. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. Sometimes that's all anyone can handle. The strange thing was, when the crime scene investigators went back to look for the bunker, they couldn't find any trace of it. No hole in the ground, no collapsed structure, no evidence that Tom and Carol Henderson had ever existed. The rental car they'd claimed to have was registered to people who had died in a house fire in 1987. But Megan was safe, and that was what mattered. Her mother cried when she saw her daughter alive. The kind of tears that wash away months of fear in a single moment. Watching them embrace, I understood something that Carol's poison had almost made me forget. Love isn't about gratitude or recognition or even remembrance. It's about the simple, fierce determination to keep the people who matter safe, no matter what it costs. It's about getting up every morning and choosing to care about someone other than yourself, even when, especially when, the world seems designed to break that caring. Sarah was waiting when the helicopter brought me home. She didn't say much, just held me for a long time while Emma patted my back and told me about the cookies she'd made. They were chocolate chip, still warm from the oven, and they tasted like everything worth fighting for. That night, after Emma was asleep and Sarah was curled against my side, I lay awake thinking about Tom and Carol Henderson and their basement full of decades-old despair. They'd been wrong about almost everything, but they'd gotten one thing right. The world is full of darkness, and most people don't understand how thin the barriers are between the ordinary and the terrible. But they'd missed the most important truth of all. The darkness doesn't win because it's stronger or smarter or more determined than the light. It wins when good people stop fighting it. When they give up on love, on hope, on the belief that some things are worth protecting no matter how much it hurts. I'd almost given up. For a few terrible minutes in that basement, I'd almost believed that nothing mattered. That all my efforts were meaningless, that everyone I loved would forget me anyway. But Megan Foster mattered. Her mother's tears of relief mattered. Emma's cookies and Sarah's fierce embrace mattered. Even the tourists and day hikers I'd never see again mattered, because they got to go home to their own families and their own versions of chocolate chip cookies and fierce embraces. Evil exists. Real evil, not just human cruelty. but something deeper and hungrier and utterly alien to everything we call good. I've seen it, fought it, and barely escaped it. But love exists too, and in the end, love is stronger. It has to be. Epilogue. 6 months later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Megan Foster was marrying her college boyfriend, a nice kid studying to be a teacher. The invitation was addressed to Ranger Derek Sullivan and family, and included a handwritten note. "Thank you for bringing me home. I'll never forget what you did, and neither will my children or their children. Love doesn't end, it just keeps growing. Hope you can make it to the ceremony. I'm saving you a dance." I showed the invitation to Sarah over breakfast. She smiled and marked the date on our calendar. "It'll be nice," she said. "A happy ending for once." Emma looked up from her cereal. "Dad, will you teach me to use a compass this weekend? For my camping merit badge?" "Of course," I said. "Basic wilderness survival is important. Are you going to tell me scary stories about people getting lost in the woods?" Sarah and I exchanged a look. There were so many stories I could tell. About the darkness that lived in wild places. About the things that hunted humans. About the price of forgetting that love is the only thing standing between us and the abyss. But Emma was 11, and some truths were too heavy for young shoulders. "Maybe when you're older," I said. "For now, let's just focus on making sure you never get lost in the first place." "Deal," Emma said, grinning. "Can we have hot chocolate when we're done?" "Always," I promised. Outside, the Olympic Mountains rose against a clear blue sky, beautiful and eternal and full of secrets. Somewhere out there, other rangers were walking other trails, looking for other lost hikers, standing guard against darkness that most people would never see or believe in. It was good work, hard work, sometimes dangerous work, but good. The kind of work that mattered. The kind of work that kept the light burning, one rescue at a time. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Tom and Carol Henderson. I read every single one. My name is Alex Carter, and this was the 6th hour searching for Lauren Davis in the trails of Blackwood National Forest. My throat burned like sandpaper, and the metallic taste of exhaustion coated my tongue as I clicked my radio to life for what felt like the 100th time. Unit 47 to base. Still no sign of the missing hiker at grid coordinates 44.2619, 71-3-28. Moving southeast toward Widows Creek Junction. Static crackled back at me, mixed with the distant voice of Ranger Martinez confirming my position. Lauren Davis, 23 years old, auburn hair, green eyes, wearing a red North Face jacket when she'd set out yesterday morning for what should have been a simple day hike on the Blackbird Trail. Her mother's voice still echoed in my head from this morning's briefing. That raw, desperate sound when she'd said, "She always calls, Mr. Carter. Lauren always calls when she gets back to her car. Always." Something was wrong here. I'd felt it the moment I'd stepped onto the Blackbird Trail at dawn, that familiar tingle at the base of my skull that had saved my ass more times than I could count in 15 years of ranger work. Other guys called it intuition. My wife Sarah called it my spidey sense. Whatever the hell it was, it had been screaming at me all day that something in these woods was fundamentally off. The shadows seemed wrong. That was the only way I could describe it as I paused to check my GPS coordinates against the worn topo map in my jacket pocket. The afternoon sun filtered through the October maples and birches, painting everything in those rich golds and crimsons that usually made me grateful for this job. But today, the shadows fell at angles that didn't quite make sense, pooling in corners where they shouldn't exist, lingering in spots where the sunlight should have burned them away. I'd found Lauren's first piece of evidence 2 hours ago, a granola bar wrapper caught on a thorn bush about 50 yards off the main trail. The wrapper was fresh, probably dropped yesterday. But what bothered me was where I'd found it. The thorn bush sat in the middle of what we called the dead zone, a quarter-acre patch where nothing grew right. trees twisted into impossible shapes, their bark scored with deep gouges that looked almost like claw marks. Even in October, the air there felt cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. My radio squawked. Unit 47, this is Base. Any updates on your position? Base, this is 47. I'm following potential evidence trail toward Sector 7G. Found what looks like a piece of fabric on deadfall about 30 minutes ago. I didn't mention that the fabric, a small strip of red North Face material, had been tied to the fallen log like a deliberate marker, tied in a perfect bow, as if someone had wanted it to be found, as if someone had wanted me to follow. The trail Lauren had apparently taken led deeper into the old growth section of Blackwood, where 100-year-old pines towered overhead and blocked out most of the afternoon light. My boots crunched through the carpet of fallen leaves, and I tried to ignore how the sound seemed to echo longer than it should, as if the forest itself was listening to my approach. That's when I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my body stand up at once. Laughter, soft, feminine, coming from somewhere ahead of me in the gathering shadows. "Lauren?" I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Lauren Davis, this is Ranger Carter with Blackwood National Forest. If you can hear me, please respond." The laughter stopped immediately, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like the forest had just died around me. No birds, no wind. Even the distant sound of Widow's Creek had vanished. I keyed my radio with shaking fingers. "Base, this is Unit 47. I think I might have auditory contact with the missing hiker, requesting immediate backup to coordinates." I squinted at my GPS unit, and my blood ran cold. The screen showed only static snow. That's when I saw her. About 20 yards ahead, standing perfectly still between two massive pine trunks, was a figure in red. My heart hammered against my ribs as I started forward, calling out again, "Lauren, thank God we've been looking for you all day. Are you hurt?" But as I got closer, something about the figure made that awful tingling sensation explode across my scalp like an electrical shock. The woman in the red jacket wasn't moving, at all. Not breathing, not shifting her weight, not even blinking as far as I could tell from this distance. She stood with her back to me, perfectly motionless, as if she'd been frozen mid-step. "Ma'am?" I approached cautiously, one hand moving instinctively to the radio on my belt. "Lauren Davis?" When I was maybe 10 feet away, she began to turn around. Slowly. Too slowly, like a music box ballerina winding down. And I realized with a horror that turned my guts to ice water that she was turning her head before she turned her body, rotating it further than any human neck should bend. The face that looked back at me wasn't Lauren Davis. It was ancient, sunken with skin like dried leather and eyes that reflected the dim forest light like an animal's. When she smiled, I saw teeth that were too sharp, too many, crowding her mouth like broken glass. The red jacket hung on her skeletal frame, torn and stained with something dark. "Looking for someone, Ranger?" Her voice was the sound of wind through dead leaves, and I realized with dawning terror that I could see straight through her. The pine trees behind her were clearly visible through her translucent flesh. I stumbled backward, my hand fumbling for the radio, for my emergency whistle, for anything that might connect me to the real world. But my equipment felt useless, toys against whatever was grinning at me from inside Lauren Davis's jacket. She came to me willingly. The thing continued, taking a gliding step forward that didn't disturb the leaves beneath her feet. Called by dreams, by whispers in the dark, they all do eventually. The forest shows them the path, and I show them other things. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Alex Carter's situation? Comment below. The shadows around us began to move independently of any light source, reaching toward me like grasping fingers. That's when my ranger training kicked in, overriding the primal terror that wanted to freeze me in place. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping across my face. I could hear her laughter following me. Not from behind, But from ahead, from both sides, from above in the canopy, it was as if the sound was coming from the forest itself. My radio crackled to life as I ran. Unit 47, this is base. We're showing your GPS signal as... Alex, are you there? Your position is showing as impossible coordinates. I tried to respond but could only gasp out fragments between ragged breaths. Base, contact with... Not Lauren. Something else. Unit 47, please repeat, you're breaking up. The trees around me seemed to be shifting, paths appearing and disappearing like a nightmare maze. Every time I thought I was heading back toward the main trail, I'd find myself in another section of old-growth forest I didn't recognize. The shadows were getting longer, reaching across the forest floor in defiance of the sun's position. That's when I saw the others, figures standing motionless between the trees, all wearing the clothes of hikers who'd gone missing over the years. I recognized some of them from the photos in our missing persons files. Maria Santos, who'd vanished in 2015, Tom Chen from last spring, and there, wearing a faded yellow windbreaker, was old Henrik Larsson, supposedly lost to a heart attack on the trails 5 years ago, though we'd never found his body. They all turned to look at me as I stumbled past, their movements mechanical, puppet-like. Their faces held the same ancient hunger as the thing wearing Lauren's jacket. "The Shadow Witch collects us," Henrik said in a voice like grinding stone. "She's been here since before the trees were saplings. We feed her loneliness." I pressed my back against a pine trunk, my chest heaving, trying to think through the panic. 15 years as a ranger. I'd seen bears, handled armed poachers, survived 3 different snowstorm rescues. This was something else entirely. My phone. I pulled out my iPhone and was surprised to see it still had signal. With shaking fingers, I called Sarah. "Alex?" Thank God, I was getting worried. "How's the search going?" The sound of her voice, normal and warm and completely unaware of the supernatural nightmare surrounding me, almost broke me down completely. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. I'm in the old growth section past Widow's Creek and something's very wrong here. If something happens to me, I need you to tell Emma I love her more than all the stars in the sky." "Alex, you're scaring me. What's happening?" "There's something in these woods, Sarah. Something that's been taking people. I found evidence of Lauren Davis, but she's not herself anymore." The phone went dead. The screen showed no signal, no battery, nothing but black glass reflecting the gathering twilight. Twilight. How was it twilight already? I'd entered these woods in full afternoon sun less than an hour ago. "Time moves differently here," said a voice I now recognized as the Shadow Witch. She materialized from a patch of darkness between 2 trees, no longer wearing Lauren's jacket. Now she appeared as herself, tall, gaunt, draped in shadows that moved like living things. Her eyes were hollow sockets that somehow still conveyed immense ancient intelligence. "Your kind built your little park around my domain, thinking you could tame the wild places. But some things are older than your civilization, Ranger. Some things remember when these woods were truly dark." The collected victims formed a circle around us, their faces expectant. Henrik stepped forward, his movements jerky and unnatural. "She feeds on isolation, on the moment when hope dies and you realize no one will find you. But she's generous too. She keeps us, gives us purpose. We help her gather others who wander too far from the paths your people made safe." I thought about Emma, my 8-year-old daughter who still believed her dad was the strongest man in the world. About Sarah, who kissed me goodbye every morning and trusted I'd come home for dinner. About Lauren Davis's mother, waiting by the phone for news about her daughter. That's when something inside me shifted. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something else. A stubborn, professional anger at this thing that had been hunting in my forest, taking people under my protection. "Where is she?" I demanded, looking directly into those hollow eye sockets. "Where is Lauren Davis?" The Shadow Witch smiled, and I saw the truth in that terrible expression. Lauren was gone, had been gone the moment she'd stepped off the main trail yesterday, following whispers only she could hear. The red jacket I'd seen was just another lure, another trap to add one more ranger to her collection. But I also saw something else in that ancient face. Loneliness, hunger, the desperate need of something that had been alone in these woods for centuries, watching the world change around her while she remained trapped in darkness. "You don't have to do this," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You've been alone so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to have a choice." The shadows around us wavered, and for just a moment I saw confusion in her hollow gaze. "I know about being alone," I continued. "I spend days by myself in these woods, and sometimes the silence gets so deep, it feels like you might disappear entirely. But I also know the difference between solitude and imprisonment." The circle of victims had stopped moving, as if they too were listening to something they'd forgotten. "Your people feared me," the Shadow Witch whispered, "drove me into the deepest places, bound me with rituals and salt circles. I am what your civilization pushed away." "Maybe," I said, "but that was centuries ago. The world's different now. People understand that some things don't fit into neat categories. There might be other options." She stared at me for a long moment, and I felt the weight of her consideration like a physical pressure against my chest. Then slowly she began to laugh. Not the horrible sound from before, but something almost sad. "You would bargain for the girl's life?" "I would bargain for all of them," I said, gesturing to the circle of missing hikers. "And for you. This can't be what you really want, to spend eternity collecting the lost and lonely." The shadows around us began to shift and writhe as if responding to some internal struggle. The collected victims looked around with confusion, as if waking from a long dream. "She's already gone," the Shadow Witch said finally. "They all are. I consume what makes them, them. What you see are echoes, memories wrapped in flesh." My heart sank, but I pressed on. "Then let them rest. And let yourself rest too. Find some peace instead of just hunger." She was quiet for so long I began to think she'd vanished entirely. Then, with a sound like wind through autumn leaves, she spoke again. Perhaps it is time. I have been so tired, Ranger, so very tired." The forest around us began to lighten, shadows retreating to their proper places under trees and rocks. The circle of victims looked around with growing awareness, then began to fade like morning mist. Henrik Larsson caught my eye as he dissolved. "Thank you," he mouthed. And then he was gone. The Shadow Witch was changing too, her ancient form becoming transparent, more shadow than substance. "The girl's body is by the old stone circle 2 miles north of here. She did not suffer long. I gave her dreams of home." "And you?" I asked. "What happens to you now?" "Now I sleep, as I should have centuries ago." She was barely visible now, just a whisper of movement in the gathering dusk. "Tell your people. Tell them some things in the deep woods are not evil, just lost. So very lost." And then she was gone, leaving behind only the normal sounds of an October evening in the forest, wind in the branches, the distant call of a night bird, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. My radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, this is base. Please respond with your current position." I looked at my GPS and was amazed to see normal coordinates, a clear signal, and my exact location marked on the digital map. "Base, this is Unit 47. I'm approximately 2 miles north of Widow's Creek Junction. I found her." It took 3 hours to guide the recovery team to Lauren Davis's body. We found her lying peacefully beside an ancient stone circle that wasn't marked on any of our official maps, looking like she'd simply laid down for a nap. The coroner would later rule it heart failure, though he couldn't explain why a healthy 23-year-old's heart had simply stopped. I never told anyone about what really happened in those woods. How could I? But over the following months, something interesting occurred. The missing persons reports from Blackwood National Forest dropped to 0. Hikers still got turned around, still needed rescue from time to time, but no one simply vanished anymore. And sometimes, on particularly quiet nights when I'm walking the forest trails alone, I swear I can feel something watching me. Not with hunger or malice, but with what almost feels like gratitude, as if something very old and very tired had finally found the peace it had been seeking for centuries. I still get that tingling sensation at the base of my skull sometimes, but now it feels different. Less like a warning and more like recognition. An acknowledgement between two beings who understand that some mysteries are better left unsolved, some darkness better left undisturbed. Lauren Davis's mother sends me a Christmas card every year. She always writes the same thing. Thank you for bringing her home. I never know how to respond because the truth is I didn't bring Lauren home. I helped something else find its way there instead. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Lauren Davis. I read every single one. My name is Nathan Parker, and I should have forgotten the case of Brandon Kyle Roberts, but something brought me back to that cursed forest 3 months after we'd officially closed the file. It was October 15th, 2018, and the morning frost clung to my windshield like dead fingers as I drove the winding road to Glacier National Park's west entrance. My iPhone 8 buzzed with another text from my wife, Sarah. Promise me you'll be careful today. Love you. I'd told her I was doing routine trail maintenance. The lie tasted like copper pennies in my mouth. Brandon Kyle Roberts, 23 years old, Eagle Scout, pre-med student from Bozeman. He'd vanished without a trace on July 8th while hiking the Avalanche Lake Trail alone. We'd searched for 2 weeks, brought in the dogs, helicopters, even thermal imaging drones. Nothing. Not a thread of his North Face jacket, not a scrap of his Merrell hiking boots. The kid had simply evaporated like morning mist. The case haunted me because it made no sense. I'd been a park ranger for 15 years, seen every type of disappearance you could imagine. Lost hikers who wandered off trail, suicide jumps from cliffs, bear attacks, hypothermia, flash floods. There was always evidence, always a logical explanation, always a fucking reason. But Brandon defied logic, and that pissed me off. I parked at the trailhead and shouldered my pack, feeling the familiar weight of my gear. Motorola APX radio, Garmin GPS unit, first aid kit, emergency shelter, headlamp, backup batteries. My service weapon, a Glock 22, sat heavy on my hip. Standard protocol for solo backcountry work, though I'd never drawn it on duty. Bears responded to bear spray. Lost hikers responded to patience and competence. Everything in nature could be understood, categorized, managed. Everything except Brandon Kyle Roberts. The trail started easy, winding through stands of Douglas fir and western red cedar. The October air smelled of decaying leaves and the faint ozone scent that preceded snow. My boots crunched through amber and crimson foliage as I followed the same path Brandon had taken 14 weeks ago. GPS coordinates, 48.6969 degree N, 113.8185 degree in W, his last known position according to his iPhone's final ping. What had drawn me back wasn't new evidence. It was Dr. Margaret Chen's call yesterday, Brandon's mother. The desperation in her voice when she said, "Please, Ranger Parker. I had another dream about him. He was calling for help. He's still alive. I know it." Dreams. Christ. But something in her voice, the raw maternal anguish, had cracked my professional cynicism just enough to make me grab my keys. I'd been hiking for 40 minutes when I smelled it. Wood smoke, but wrong somehow. Too acrid. Too organic. Like burning hair mixed with charcoal. I stopped, hand instinctively moving to my radio, and listened. The forest was too quiet. No bird calls, no chittering of squirrels, no buzz of insects. Just the whisper of wind through pine needles and my own breathing. That's when I saw him. 30 yards ahead, sitting beside the trail on a moss-covered log, was a homeless man. Tattered green army jacket, filthy jeans with holes in the knees, boots held together with duct tape. His long, greasy hair hung like curtains around his gaunt face. He was hunched over a small fire, warming his hands. "Hey there," I called out, approaching with practiced ranger friendliness. "You doing okay?" The man looked up, and I got my first clear view of his face. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, scraggly beard matted with what looked like dried food. But his eyes were the pale blue of glacial ice, and they seemed to bore right through me. "Cold morning, Ranger," he said, voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "Been waiting for someone to come along." Something about his tone made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling down. Homeless folks sometimes ended up in the park, especially when the weather turned. Part of my job was getting them connected with social services, not treating them like criminals. "I'm Nathan Parker with the Park Service," I said, stopping about 10 feet away. The smell was stronger now, that burned hair stench mixed with something else, something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. "Are you having any medical issues? Need help getting back to town?" The vagrant smiled, and I saw his teeth were black with decay. Several were missing entirely. "Funny you should ask about help," he said, standing slowly. He was taller than I'd expected, maybe 6'4", but thin as a scarecrow. "I've been helping folks myself. Lots of folks. Young fellow came through here a few months back, college boy. Said his name was..." My blood turned to ice water. "Brandon?" the vagrant continued, his smile widening. "Brandon Kyle Roberts." The forest suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. My hand moved automatically to my radio, muscle memory from years of training, but the vagrant was still talking. "Scared little rabbit, that one. Lost his way in the dark. I offered to help him find the path back to his car." The man's pale eyes never left mine. He was so grateful, so trusting. "Where is he?" The words came out harder than I intended. "Where's Brandon Roberts?" The vagrant tilted his head like a curious dog. "Why, he's helping me now, Ranger. Just like you're going to help me." That's when I noticed his fingernails. They were too long, curved like talons, and stained dark brown with what I desperately hoped was dirt. When he smiled again, I realized his canine teeth were elongated, sharp as needles. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was impossible. Humans didn't have teeth like that. Fingernails didn't grow that way. But the evidence was right in front of me, grinning with rotten fangs and smelling like a charnel house. "Sir, I need you to stay where you are," I said, reaching for my radio. "I'm calling this in." The vagrant laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Go ahead, Ranger. Call your friends. Tell them all about the scary homeless man in the woods." I keyed the radio. "Unit 47 to dispatch. I've got a situation at mile marker 2-3 on the Avalanche Lake Trail. Need backup and possible medical assistance." Static, then more static. I tried again. "Unit 47 to any unit. Do you copy?" Nothing but white noise. The vagrant was still laughing. Technology's funny, isn't it? Sometimes it just stops working. I looked at my radio display. Full battery, strong signal bars, but nothing but static coming through. My GPS unit was showing error messages. Even my iPhone had no signal, though I'd had 3 bars at the trailhead. "What did you do?" I asked, hand moving to my weapon. "Me? Nothing at all." The vagrant took a step closer, and I caught another whiff of that putrid stench. Though I have been learning so much from my new friends. Brandon taught me about college life, about dreams and ambitions, about how much it hurts when those dreams get torn away piece by piece. He took another step. I drew my Glock, pointing it center mass. "Stop right there. Don't move." The vagrant looked at my gun and laughed harder. "Oh, Ranger, you still don't understand, do you?" That's when Brandon Kyle Roberts stepped out from behind a tree, or what was left of him. The thing wearing Brandon's North Face jacket and Merrill boots looked like it had been dead for months. His skin was the color of old parchment, stretched tight over protruding bones. His eyes were solid black, no whites visible, and his mouth hung open, revealing a tongue that was too long and too purple. When he moved, I heard his joints creak like old leather, but the worst part was that he was moving at all. "Hello, Ranger Parker," Brandon said, his voice like wind through a graveyard. "Thank you for coming back for me." My world tilted. Every law of physics, every rule of reality I'd built my life on, shattered like glass hitting concrete. I'd seen bodies. I knew what death looked like. Brandon Roberts was dead. Had been dead for months. But he was standing there, walking toward me, talking. I fired 3 rounds center mass. The bullets punched through Brandon's chest, leaving ragged holes in his jacket, but he kept walking. No blood, no reaction, just that horrible creaking sound as his desiccated joints moved. "Your turn, Ranger," the vagrant said, and I spun back toward him. He was no longer human. His pale skin had turned ash gray, stretched tight over a skull that was wrong, elongated with eye sockets too deep and cheekbones too sharp. His fingers had stretched into foot-long claws, and when he opened his mouth, I saw rows of needle-sharp teeth descending into his throat like a shark. "I've been so hungry," the thing said in that gravelly voice. "And you're going to feed me for such a long time." I emptied my clip into the creature. 15 rounds, most finding their mark. The bullets tore chunks of gray flesh from its torso and arms, spraying black ichor across the forest floor. The thing staggered backward, more annoyed than hurt, then looked down at the wounds. As I watched in horror, the holes began to close. The flesh writhed and twisted, reforming itself, until the creature stood whole again. "My turn," it hissed. The thing that had been a vagrant moved faster than anything human could move. One moment it was 10 feet away. The next its claws were raking across my chest, shredding through my uniform shirt and the Kevlar vest underneath, like they were tissue paper. Pain exploded across my ribs as 4 parallel gashes opened from my left shoulder to my right hip. Blood soaked through my shirt, hot and sticky. I stumbled backward, fumbling for a fresh magazine, but the creature was already on me again. Its claws caught my right forearm and I felt bones crack. My service weapon flew from numb fingers, spinning away into the underbrush. The thing's other hand grabbed my throat, lifting me off the ground with impossible strength. Up close, I could see that its eyes weren't eyes at all, but empty sockets filled with writhing shadow. Its breath was the stench of rotting meat and sulfur. "Do you believe now, Ranger?" it whispered, tightening its grip on my throat. "Do you believe in things that go bump in the night?" Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. My lungs burned for air. I clawed uselessly at the thing's iron grip, feeling my fingernails break against its stone-hard flesh. Then I remembered the picture in my wallet. Sarah and our daughter Emma at her 7th birthday party last month. Emma blowing out candles on her princess cake, Sarah laughing, both of them looking at me with pure love and joy. I'd promised Sarah I'd be home for dinner. I'd promised Emma we'd work on her science project tonight. I'd made 1,000 little promises that tied me to the world of the living, and I'd be damned if I'd break them for some impossible nightmare wearing a vagrant's face. With the last of my strength, I drove my knee into the creature's solar plexus. It didn't hurt the thing, but the surprise made it loosen its grip just enough for me to tear free. I hit the ground hard, gasping for air, blood streaming down my chest. The creature looked down at me with something like respect. "Interesting," it said. "Most humans give up by now, but you have something to fight for, don't you?" I tried to answer, but only managed to wheeze. My throat felt like it had been crushed. "The love of family," the creature continued, circling me like a shark. "So pure, so powerful, I'm going to enjoy corrupting it." That's when I understood. This thing, whatever it was, fed on more than just flesh. It fed on hope, on love, on all the things that made us human. Brandon hadn't just been killed, he'd been hollowed out, turned into a puppet for something that existed to destroy everything good in the world. And it wanted to do the same to me. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Nathan's situation? Comment below. The creature reached down with one clawed hand, and I saw my death in its gesture. But as its fingers closed around my skull, I felt something impossible happen. Warmth flooded through me. Not the heat of fever or adrenaline, but something clean and pure and blazing with righteous fury. I thought of Sarah's laugh, Emma's gap-toothed smile, the way they both hugged me when I came home from work. I thought of Brandon's mother, Dr. Chen, and the desperate hope in her voice when she asked me to find her son. I thought of every hiker I'd ever guided to safety, every lost soul I'd brought home. every small victory against the chaos and cruelty of an indifferent universe. The warmth became fire. Light erupted from my hands, brilliant white-gold radiance that burned away the shadows hiding in the thing's eye sockets. The creature shrieked, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure cooker, and staggered backward. "Impossible," it hissed. "You're just a man." "Yeah," I gasped, climbing to my feet. The light was still pouring from my hands, growing brighter with each heartbeat. "Just a man who loves his family more than he fears you." I grabbed the creature's wrist and felt its flesh sizzle under my touch. Black smoke rose from where my fingers made contact, and the thing's scream could have shattered windows. "Where's Brandon?" I demanded. "Where's his body?" The creature tried to pull away, but my grip was iron now. The light was burning through its stolen flesh, revealing something underneath that hurt to look at directly. "Gone," it gasped. "Fed him to the darkness months ago. That thing is just an echo." I looked over at the shambling corpse of Brandon Kyle Roberts. As the light from my hands grew brighter, the thing began to dissolve like mist in sunlight. Whatever necromancy had been animating it couldn't survive in the presence of this blazing purity. "Tell his mother," I said to the creature, increasing the pressure on its wrist until I felt bones snap. "Tell her he didn't suffer." The creature laughed, even as its flesh continued to burn. "You think you've won? This forest is full of lost souls, Ranger, full of people who've given up hope, and I'll claim every single one of them. Not if I stop you first." The light exploded outward from my hands like a flashbang grenade. The creature's scream cut off abruptly as its body simply unraveled. Layer by layer, flesh and bone and whatever passed for its soul were stripped away until nothing remained but wisps of black smoke dissipating on the wind. Brandon's remains collapsed into a pile of empty clothes and old bones. At least now Dr. Chen would have something to bury. The light faded, leaving me standing alone in the forest with the taste of copper in my mouth and 4 parallel scars across my chest that would never fully heal. My radio crackled back to life, full of frantic voices asking for my location. I looked down at my hands, still tingling with residual warmth, and wondered what the hell had just happened to me. 15 years of rational scientific thinking, and now I'd apparently developed supernatural powers fueled by the love of my family. The old Nathan Parker would have tried to rationalize it away. Equipment malfunction, hallucinations brought on by stress, mass hysteria. The new Nathan Parker just keyed his radio and said, "Unit 47 to dispatch. I've found Brandon Kyle Roberts. We're going to need a recovery team at my location." As I waited for backup, I thought about Dr. Chen and the terrible news I'd have to deliver. "Your son is dead. Has been dead for months." But at least now she'd know what happened. At least now she could grieve properly instead of clinging to false hope. And maybe, just maybe, she'd understand when I told her that her boy had helped me save other people, that his death, however horrible, had led to something that could protect future hikers from the same fate, because the creature had been right about one thing. This forest was full of lost souls. People who wandered off the marked trails, physically and metaphorically, looking for something they couldn't name. And now that I knew what was hunting them in the darkness, I had work to do. I pulled out my phone to text Sarah. "Case closed, coming home for dinner. Love you both." Some promises were worth keeping, no matter what tried to stop you. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Brandon. I read every single one.